welcome to Girls Bookshelf. I'm Roshi, and I'm going to be interviewing Kirsten Larson, and she is the author of Fire of Stars, which is about a young woman who discovered what stars are made out of. And I have my questions, and she has some answers, and with that, I'll say bye to you later. Hello.
Hi, how are you today, Ariel?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So, can you start by introducing yourself, telling us a bit about your background and what inspired you to become a writer?
Sure. So my name is Kirsten Larson, and I am the author of 3 picture books that are currently out: The Fire of Stars, Woodwire Wings, and A True Wonder. I enjoy writing true stories for children. And before I started doing that, I worked at NASA, where my job was to help explain all the really cool things that NASA was doing to the general public and also to the news media so that they could write news stories. So my job was in public affairs for NASA. And I started writing for children because my kids loved nonfiction stories. We would go to the library when they were really little, when they were in preschool, and they would just pull all these nonfiction books off of the shelf. And as we started reading them together, I thought that that was a job that I could do, and it was something that I would really enjoy. So that's when I decided to become a writer for kids.
What inspired you to write Fire of Stars?
So I learned about Cecilia Payne. She's the main character in The Fire of Stars. I learned about her on a TV show called The Cosmos, hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he had an episode called Sisters of the Sun about 3 different women who worked at Harvard Observatory. And Annie Jump Cannon already had a picture book written about her. So did Henrietta Leavitt, but nobody had written about Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin yet. So for me, I think the fact that she made such amazing discoveries in the 1920s as a very young woman, at a time when there weren't a lot of women working in astronomy, that really fascinated me. And I wanted to know, what makes a person like that tick? What makes a person like that decide that they want to do something amazing like that?
How did you come up with the title?
You know what? The title was a really hard thing, and we didn't come up with the title for a very long time. So when my editor, Melissa Manlove, bought the book, we were at that time calling it Cecilia Payne, Making of a Star, and in parentheses, Scientist. And it actually took a lot of brainstorming between me and my editor and my literary agent, and we all just were trying to brainstorm what was a title that would work for both Cecilia's story and also for the story of how a star is formed. So it was really tricky, and it took a lot of us working together to come up with the title.
Well, titles like that can be really tricky sometimes. I'm glad you have a good title now, because when I first read the title Fire of the Stars, it sounds like really interesting, and that's good for nonfiction books, because usually, like, when they're trying to figure out something, they like just browse through, and then when they see a fun title and they see the subtitle, that shows them that they're going to learn something, but then it sounds fun.
Right. Well, and for us, the really important thing, the whole idea of like fire, it's not just about being bright, but also to like have a passion for something, right? If you're on fire for something, you're really passionate about it. And that's really what this book is about. It's about Cecilia Payne's passion for science and for discovering new things. So I'm glad that we captured that and got it in the title.
So when did you start working at NASA?
So when I was in college, I worked 2 summers at NASA. And then when I graduated from college, I went to work full time at NASA. So I worked at NASA full time for about 6 years.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a long time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I worked for NASA in California, where I live now. They do a lot of high-speed flight research at a place called NASA Armstrong. I worked there, and then I also worked at NASA headquarters. And back in the day when we flew the space shuttles, I got to travel to Florida for space shuttle launches and work with the news media down there. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, that sounds really cool. What did you discover in California?
Well, I'll tell you one. You want to hear a really cool thing they're working on right now? So, actually, in January, they're going to be rolling out a brand new test airplane called the X-59. And it is a really, if you look it up online, it's a really interesting design. It's really long and thin, kind of like a needle. And it's trying to test some technologies so that we can fly faster. So there used to be a jet called the Concorde, and you could fly from the United States to Europe, and it would take like half the time of a flight now. And so they're trying to figure out a way to make sonic booms that happen when you go supersonic, how to make them quieter. So maybe we can fly supersonic across the US someday and get to from like California to New York a lot faster.
Well, I hope that happens.
Me too.
Yeah, that would basically be like teleporting.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's a step on the way to teleporting. Maybe we'll get to teleporting next.
But I don't think they should do like big circles because then that's the first thing aliens are going to come to.
But do we know what the aliens look like, right? So far, when they're thinking about new life on other planets, it doesn't look like what we think it does in the movies and the
Uh-huh.
TV shows, right?
Yeah.
More like little microbes.
Have you ever like sat on a countryside and looked up at the stars?
I have. In fact, one of my really fond memories when I was a little kid, I remember my parents buying a telescope. Um, and I remember when I was probably 8, 9, 10, I remember we would set that up in the backyard and look up at the stars. So that's
Mhm.
a really good childhood memory for me. So yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, I've always enjoyed looking at the sky. And in fact, we have a really good telescope now at my house. And so sometimes we'll pull it out and take it outside, especially when you can see a lot of planets or when a lot of really cool things are happening in the
What
sky.
sort of planets have you seen?
Well, a lot of times you can see things like Venus, and sometimes I've seen gotten some pretty good views of like Jupiter with the dot and everything. So
Hmm.
yeah, you can see some pretty cool stuff if you've got a
Hmm.
if you've got a good microscope. I mean, a good telescope, not a microscope. That wouldn't help.
Yeah. I've never actually seen through a telescope.
Well, sometimes I'm also pretty lucky because I don't live that far from the Griffith Observatory. And they, about once a month, they have a really cool thing called a star party. And at that time, they'll let members of the general public go and look through their really big telescope, but also all kinds of people bring their own telescopes and set them up outside. So you can just go around and check out everybody else's telescope. So maybe there's a group near you having a star party. That would be fun.
Well, that is what I call lucky. Is there anything that happened in the book that influenced in your life too?
Well, I think for me, I always kind of think of Cecilia Payne as an underdog. I think people kind of underestimated her and what she was capable of.
Hmm.
And sometimes, I feel like I have a lot in common with her. She wanted to discover something new more than anything else in the world. And she talks about, kind of chasing that feeling of figuring something else, figuring something out for herself. And that's how I feel when I'm writing. When I'm writing, I'm sort of chasing this idea of what I want my story to be. And sometimes it takes me a really long time to figure out how my story is supposed to be. And there's nothing like that feeling of figuring it out all by yourself or with the help of your critique partners, just what your story's supposed to be. And really for her, she was really chasing that feeling of figuring things out. And I feel like that's what I do too.
Hmm. And where did you get the idea for like on the side to do that star process of how a star was born?
Oh, you know what? I'm always talking with other writers and reading other books. And I had seen some books that were they're parallel stories. They kind of tell two different stories on different pages. So I'd seen a lot of books like that. And I was talking with a friend of mine, Hannah Holt, who wrote a really cool book called The Diamond and the Boy. So that would be a fun one to go read. And her book's a little bit different than mine, and it wasn't out at the time, but we were kind of talking about the idea, and it made me think that that could, telling two stories at the same time on the same page could be a really cool way to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of took it, I kind of think of writing as a puzzle, and I took it as a challenge to try to see, was there like one line of text that I could write that would tell both the star story, but then also would apply to Cecilia's story. And so I kind of made it like a little puzzle for myself that I had to figure out. But
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of inspired to try that by some of the other parallel stories that I had seen.
Yeah. I really like it in the end where you like describe all that other stuff because it's really cool to like I always appreciate it when after like a sort of short story in the beginning of the book, they have all
Mhm.
that information in the back. And that's also really good for researching because I just want to pour out on that book.
Yeah. So we call that back matter, and I think back matter is a really important part of your story because I wanted to keep the story itself more simple, and I wanted to use very poetic language to give everybody that sense of wonder. So I didn't want to fill it with a lot of facts about stars. I wanted to keep it very simple, but I still want to do all, I wanted everybody to be able to get the information. So that's where the back matter comes into play. I can put all that very specific information in the back so then I can keep my main story very simple and poetic.
Mm-hmm. Well, it did tell a lot about Cecilia Payne in the back, and I think it was a bit unfair that she had to go to London just because her brother had better schooling.
Yeah, well, that was the time, right? That was the time period, and unfortunately, there weren't as many opportunities for women either to um, go to elementary schools or even colleges, or to work officially as astronomers. I mean, she didn't. There's a timeline of her life in the back matter, but I mean, she was doing the work of a college professor, but didn't get called a college professor for many, many years. We've made a lot of changes and a lot of improvements so that women are treated more fairly. But, unfortunately, that was the time period that she grew up in.
Mm. Well, we're lucky that we're not in that time period anymore, and you got to go on off and get in NASA.
Yeah, right. So, if, like, yeah, that probably I wouldn't have had the opportunity to work for NASA if I had lived at a different time. So you're exactly right. So I think it's exciting that there are so many more opportunities for um, all kids today and for all people. And that's part of the reason that I want to, inspire kids, is I want them to realize that there have always been women working in science and in engineering, and I want them to think of themselves as potential scientists or engineers and be inspired to pursue their dreams, which is why I like to write those true stories.
Mm-hmm. That was very like well explained. I think if someone was recording your words down, I think you would have just written a paragraph in a book right there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's fun. It's fun to talk. I always find it fun to talk to other writers and other creative people to see, why we write the things that we write or create the things that we create. We all have our different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What message or theme do you hope readers learn other than the fact that they can be potential scientists themselves?
Yeah, so one thing I think about with this book is, I kind of think about what makes a scientist, right? And so for Cecilia Payne, it was being a very close observer of nature, right? So a big part of being a writer or a scientist or an engineer is taking time to observe the world around you, to let your mind wander and to be bored. And another piece of becoming a scientist for Cecilia Payne was persistence when she encountered all those obstacles. So those are the types of things that I want readers to think about the importance of seeing like a scientist and persisting like a scientist, so that they can maybe become a scientist one day too.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lot of scientists.
Well, we need a lot of scientists. We have a lot of, the world has a lot of big challenges in front of us. And so we're going to need all these really smart people in the future to help us navigate all of these things that are facing us.
Well, teleporting is navigating.
Like
Well,
teleport. Yeah. I mean, we might need to teleport. We need to build some faster airplanes. We got all kinds of stuff we have to do in the future.
yeah. If you could give one piece of advice to kids who are just starting to write, what would it be?
Just to be messy and have fun with your drafts. I think sometimes we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make things perfect and pretty the very first time. And that's really not how the process works. It doesn't work that way for engineers. It doesn't work that way for writers. So just be messy and have fun. Have fun with your draft and you can fix everything later. Just get your story on the page and you can go back and make it pretty later.
Be messy. That sounds fun.
Yeah, be messy. You should see my messy. I don't have them in here right now, but you should see my messy writer's notebooks. They're very messy.
Um, yeah, it's even in the name.
Mhm.
If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think I would like to tell myself that you don't have to know what you want to do when you grow up, that you can do lots of different things, and that's okay. So for me, I've done some work as a journalist. I've done some work for NASA. I've worked in fundraising for nonprofits, and now I write books for children. So you don't have to be one thing. You can try a lot of different things.
Well, that certainly puts the pressure off my back for now.
Yeah, tell your mom I said that.
Okay. What do you enjoy doing for fun?
So I like to take a lot of walks outside with my dog Chloe, and I like to hike. And after 20 years of not singing in a choir, I went back and joined a choir this year. So I really enjoy singing in a choir.
I'm also in a choir, and
Are you? You are? That's so
yeah, we're
cool.
performing tonight.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Yay. We'll break a leg.
thanks. If you could go back in time and meet Celia Payne herself,
Mhm.
if you could choose three questions to ask her, what would it be?
Oh, that's a big question. I think I would want to know, she seemed like somebody who was kind of lonely growing up. And so I would like to find out a little bit more about that. I would like to find out a little bit more about how she felt about being around kids her own age. So I'd like to know that. I would like to know, um, when the people around her first told her that they didn't believe her ideas about what made the sun. um, I guess I'm just curious, what went through her head and why did she, not fight harder for her ideas initially?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have some ideas about why that may be, but I'm curious about that. Um, and then what a third question for Cecilia Payne. I think I would just like to know a little bit more about her family and her family life. I know
Yeah.
she had a couple of kids. She was married to an astronomer, and I would like to know a little bit more about how she balanced working so hard as an astronomer and being a mom and being a wife and how that all worked for her.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think she'd certainly have some very interesting answers to that.
I'm sure she would.
And then you could write another book on that and become famous.
There you go. There you go. That's what I need. Now it's not a teleporter. Now I need a time machine so I could go back in time. So we have to build a time machine now too.
Well, from what they've described in the smoky streets of London, I'm not very optimistic about that. But if they could come to us, they could just live a life of
Oh,
luxury and have sip some
uh,
lemonade.
there you go. I think you've got it. Cecilia Payne should come to us. I think you're right.
Mhm. Yeah, she'd definitely be happy to hear that people all around the world recognize her.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And I also think she would be really excited about all the cool things that we're discovering in astronomy every single day. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that would probably inspire her to do some new research, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're learning all kinds of cool things in astronomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows? She might get famous all over again.
Yeah. I mean, she might make a discovery about Mars, or maybe she'll discover alien life on a planet. I mean, who knows?
Mm. So, are you planning to write more books?
Yeah, so I'm always writing new books. I have a couple of more that are supposed to come out in a couple of years. And then, yeah, I'm always working on new projects. I have one that we're trying to sell right now and another one I'm trying to revise. So I'm always working on a lot of different projects.
What's the one that you're trying to sell called?
I can't tell you, it's a secret, but I will tell you the my next two books. I have one coming out in 2025 called This Is How You Know. It's a love letter to the scientific method. That's illustrated by Cornelia Lee. And also I have my first graphic novel coming out that year. It's called Light of Resistance. It's illustrated by Barbara McClintock. And that's a World War II story about a woman in World War II in Paris who saved a lot of art from the Nazis. She spied on the Nazis and figured out where they were taking all of this art that they took from people. And she helped get it returned. Yeah, so that's coming out in a couple of years.
I think my favorite thing so far that I'm discovering about your books are they're all about women.
Yeah, I like to write about women. You're discovering a theme there. You're discovering a theme. And I should say, I didn't say that, you know, Katherine Roy is the illustrator and this of the Fire of Stars, and the Fire of Stars would be nothing without Katherine's beautiful pictures, because I don't draw the pictures, but I should mention Katherine.
Yeah, I especially like the cover page because it looks really nice.
Which page?
Like the cover page.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, and I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a little secret with this book. Well, go ahead. It looks like she's.
Oh yeah, it looks
I was
like
gonna
kissing a star.
Yeah, it does look like she's kind of holding a star. Okay, but I was going to show you a secret, which you may already know, but this one has the book cover itself is a little different than the book jacket.
Oh, that's a star.
Yeah. So you have one star on the front and one star underneath.
Yeah. We've run out of questions and time. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me and good luck at your choir concert.